TIL Abraham Lincoln was kicked in the head by a horse at age 9, almost severed a thumb with an axe, got frostbite on his feet, clubbed on the head during a robbery, had malaria and smallpox, and experienced the death of his mother, sister, and 2 sons. He suffered from melancholy clinical depression. Abraham Lincoln was kicked in the head by a horse at age 9, almost severed a thumb with an axe, got frostbite on his feet, clubbed on the head during a robbery, had malaria and smallpox, and experienced the death of his mother, sister, and 2 sons. He suffered from melancholy clinical depression. Well, yeah. I imagine he would have depression after all that. I get depressed when the supermarket doesn't have my favorite brand of barbecue sauce. Abe got shot in the head, but I'm surprised he didn't mentally snap first, and shoot everybody else in the head. Abraham Lincoln was fortunate that he was born in the 19th century, otherwise if he is alive today, he would have been in a mental care facility. It was an astonishing miracle that he became president in the 1860s without 21st century medical technology advancements, otherwise the USA we know today would not have existed by now. I remember reading somewhere that he was found in a near comatose depressive state after he received the nomination from the Republican convention, unsure if it was the first or second convention, and that his depression was so severe that they would hide all of the forks and knives when he went through an episode. I fell off a horse at age 5, almost severed my knuckle cooking HelloFresh. Got elevated blood pressure. One time I hit my head on a tennis table. I mean, I feel like any person has a list of injuries or happenstances over a lifetime, and these are not really that impressive. Got frostbite on my land. Country life in the early to mid 1800s, like Lincoln's childhood, was rough. His family took in an orphan, who became like another sister to him. Orphans, step-siblings, step-parents, etc. were common, due to disease, death and childbirth, farm accidents, Indian ambushes, etc. I'm having a really bad dose of depression right now. Life circumstances are grim and this is surprisingly comforting. If this guy could save the country from a civil war and emancipate half the nation while suffering depression, maybe I can get out of this too. I almost lost my thumb to a pneumatic wood splitter. When you hold a log in one of those, hold it by the sides and don't have any fingers on top. The wedge jumped over and took a small piece of my thumb off. Could have been so much worse. The smallpox that Lincoln had while president was fortunately a mild case. He joked that it was a shame that nobody could come to see him, because for the first time he had something he could give to everyone. Remember when you were making out with your first girlfriend and you came right as she touched your leg? It was me, Lincoln. I jerked you off at super speed so it seemed like you nutted at just a woman's touch. One time I spent a lot of time entering a shit ton of data to my Excel sheet at work, and I saved over it with a blank Excel sheet and lost all my data. But yeah, this Lincoln stuff sounds rough too, I guess. Before clean water and vaccines, the Capitol got water right out of the sewage ditches drained, and dead horses and ox were thrown in, already rotting. The White House had only filthy water, plus he was an absolute savage and would fight anyone, anytime, anywhere. While he was campaigning, he seen one of his friends being beaten in the crowd, so he jumped down mid-speech and beat some ass. Abe Lincoln was a true leader. Seeing a memorial in DC was one of the coolest experiences of my life. Of course, being from Illinois, he's constantly talked about but still not talked about enough. He's my worst favorite president. I don't think that presidents with mental illnesses should be allowed to be president, as they may not be thinking totally clear on the issues. For me, the most insane thing is the before-after pictures of him at the start of his presidency and at the end how much he aged. Another reason I don't want to be president. He suffered from melancholy clinical depression. Depression? Suffered? Like that is the normal outcome based on what happened to him. It would be wrong if he was happy. First read that is Andrew Lincoln and was mega impressed that he still managed to become a star after so much hardship. Lamau. That's what I get for quickly skimming. He was able to overcome his depression knowing he was blessed with a massive hog. That is why he wore the hat, so he could hide it if he got an erection in public. It was also believed he either had Marfan syndrome or meant to be. This is why he grew his iconic beard as he got older. It hid the fact his face was asymmetrical. Frankly, it's amazing that he managed to kill so many vampires. Obviously, I knew he'd killed some, but it's the sheer number that's unusual. He once wrote to a friend something along the lines of, "If my depression was distributed amongst everyone, it would still be unbearable." Inspiring. He went through so many trials and tribulations, and he still gave the US the greatest gift ever. He invented the chokeslam. Couldn't fit it in the title, but he was also struck by his wife apparently on multiple occasions. Oh, and he was shot in the head. Meanwhile, my co-worker had a nervous breakdown at work because they wouldn't let him leave an hour early to pick up his rental skis. And then he had to hold a nation at war with itself together. And then his son died in the middle of the war. I'd be depressed too. I'm sure some of that melancholy also came from being the only US president to preside during a civil war for now anyways. It really looks like a bunch of incompetent racist time travelers all failing at their job to kill him before he ends slavery. The death of his mother was not as bad as all the kids he lost. A lot of presidents had dick fathers. That's interesting. I also heard he possibly considered going with the Donner Party when they made the infamous voyage but decided against it. I'm seeing comments about him dying to a bullet in the head, but I thought he got beat to death on the ass with a hammer. He was also probably the first atheist president. I think all Republicans must have suffered some sort of traumatic head injury as a child. It's like a rite of passage. Isn't it generally a given that everyone is going to experience the death of their parents at some point in their life? I mean, the majority of us experience the death of our mother and father. He was 34, so not overly young for the time. And if all that stress wasn't enough, he took on the presidency, freed the slaves and still managed to hunt vampires. Lincoln also survived an assassination attempt when someone shot his hat off his head while he was riding his horse. There's talk going around that he had Marfan syndrome. I mean, he was our tallest president to this day, but Eddie K. Just going to be honest here, but that all sounds normal for a person in his time. Nothing sensational at all. And then was shot in the head. With everything I know of him, what a life lived. His luck just ran out. Yet you got him for complaining to their therapists that sometimes they doubt themselves or that they're sad. He had also considered joining the infamous Donner Party expedition, but his wife convinced him otherwise. And was also a hell of a wrestler boxer. Also lost his first love to typhoid fever. Mary Todd was a sad replacement for the irreplaceable, and still managed to become POTUS without Big Pharma or Freud. Huh. Who would have thought it? If a cabal of vampires started a war and nearly tore your country apart, you'd be depressed too. Being kicked in the head by a horse was not the worst headache he'd experienced in his lifetime. Jesus, imagine how screwed W would have been had he been left to his own devices like Abe here. He also jumped out a window multiple times, because he didn't want to vote on a few bills. He also had one of my relatives educate him. I think the results speak for themselves. Fell down a well, went cross-eyed. Got kicked by a mule, eyes go back. I don't know. He also was a renowned wrestler, which is what led to him even becoming a politician. Imagine how it must be to be this guy's therapist. So this was my life. Dude, WTF. On the plus side, he was inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame in 1992. I have not validated this, but apparently he also had a shrill, unpleasant voice. All of that and going to the theater was still the worst experience of his life. Well shit, I would suffer from melancholy, too, if I had to deal with all that. These days people get depressed when the Wi-Fi goes out. Welcome to the future. The man was a vampire hunting some bitch according to the documentary I saw, and he personally approved the hanging of 38 Native Americans. What a guy. My brain, and he still managed to get married. What is wrong with you? Well, George Washington had like 30 goddamn dicks. So there's that. This seems standard for 19th century life, to be honest. Shit was hard. I heard the only thing that lifted his mood was a trip to the theater. This is why I give strippers $5 bills. They've had rough lives, too. Jesus, maybe going to that theater helped clear his thoughts finally. Lincoln was a cool movie, but man, I want a movie about all this shit. He was incredible at using holy magic to defeat the undead as well. You forgot that he saved the US from a hostile vampiric takeover. He still bench pressed the slaves to freedom though. What a guy. Betting that horse kick had something to do with his depression. And he apparently also lost his first girlfriend, Anne Rutledge. All poorly executed assassination attempts by time travelers. Managed the country through a civil war. Kinda missed a big one. He is also said to be one of the best wrestlers of all time. And he was probably gay lol with his famous 4 scores. Man from 1800s exists as normal man from 1800s. News at 11. He suffered from melancholy. With good reason apparently, and is the only president in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. Damn, someone should put that guy out of his misery. And all that was before he booked his theater tickets, all of which drove him into becoming a vampire hunter. And that was all just on the way to school barefoot.